Today's session is about how strategic skepticism leads to greater certainty. Now, I'm not saying that being skeptical is a good thing and that you should always be skeptical. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is strategic skepticism, which is different. And if you will begin with strategic skepticism, you will end with wisdom. The whole thing lies on a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have absolute skepticism, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have absolute certainty. If you have skepticism, you do not have certainty. If you have certainty, you do not have skepticism. But there are extreme ends of the spectrum. Now, at the extreme of absolute skepticism, oftentimes that skepticism comes from being on autopilot, where our emotions are causing us to be skeptical, where there are past wounds that cause our programming to be skeptical. And that's our default mode, is being skeptical about everything. And it often is the lens of our past being projected into the lens of our future. Now, I understand exactly that experience. I came from poverty. My parents did not have a lot of money, and they ran a restaurant, and that restaurant later on became bankrupt. And I really felt the pains of that, not being able to have a place to rest, not being able to see the future, not feeling protected, and feeling like things were really scarce, including food was very scarce. And as a result of that, when I later went on to college, I carried that pain with me. I carried that past circumstances with me, and I was skeptical about everything. I couldn't trust anyone. I didn't believe people when they said that they got me. And so that skepticism is an example of when our emotions cause us to operate on autopilot. And a lot of things can happen when we're on autopilot, but one of the things that can happen is the default of being skeptical about people and skeptical about things. Now, the other end of the spectrum is absolute certainty. And this is very different from being certain about things. Sometimes you're certain about things, which is not the same thing. Absolute certainty is a subjective feeling of conviction. It's a belief that one has perfect and complete information about all outcomes. And the thing about that is that if you start with absolute certainty, it ends up revealing your deepest ignorance, while those who embrace their ignorance discover their deepest truths. And this is important because wisdom begins with the awareness of our own ignorance. When we are aware of our own ignorance, that's when we begin to seek the truths. That's when we begin to challenge our own beliefs. That's when we are open to a different way of seeing things. And that's when we let go of absolute certainty. Now, it's okay to be certain. Sometimes you set goals. Sometimes you have a vision about your future and you're certain about that. But I submit to you that the certainty that you experience in those moments is not absolute certainty. It's not a feeling of conviction that you have perfect information, that you are absolutely clear on that you can produce outcomes. It's not about that. That type of certainty is in the belief that you're on the right path and the trusting in your own skill sets and the people that are around you that can support you. Isn't it funny that those who have absolute certainty, and it really is a subjective conviction, isn't it funny that those who have ignorance tend to display more confidence? Have you ever noticed that before? And they're also the individuals that have the most opinions, the ones that have that conviction, the ones that are not yet aware of their own ignorance. And it shows. They have the most opinions. They tend to display more confidence. They tend to use language that conveys confidence, and they tend to get offended if someone doesn't recognize their confidence. Isn't that funny? Isn't that interesting? So that's why what I want to talk to you about today is how you can have strategic skepticism, because it is important to protect oneself. But there is a fine balance and a threshold at which we are overly skeptical, and that leads to more harm than protection. So today, I'm just going to be talking about how strategic skepticism is going to lead to greater certainty. Now, there are certain things that you can be skeptical about strategically that help produce the outcomes you desire in your life. The first one is to learn to be skeptical about assumptions so that you may become certain about facts. I talked about seeking the truths. And the truths is synonymous with fact. But the problem is, a lot of times people can confuse opinions with fact. People can confuse editorialisms for facts. But facts are facts. There's no such a thing as a fact that is also opinion. There's no such a thing as a fact that is also an expression of one's feelings. There's no such a thing as a fact that is an assumption. There's no such a thing. But we use language so lackadaisically that oftentimes we confuse these things for facts. So one of the most important things to be certain about facts is to be clear on differentiating facts from opinions, from feelings, and definitely from assumptions. Assumptions come from our opinions. They come from incomplete information, not knowing everything, but thinking that we do. And it comes from our past programming around projecting the lens of our past into the lens of the future. So learn to be skeptical about assumptions, even your own assumptions. So that also means being good at and becoming better at recognizing when those are assumptions that you're having, or those are you're assuming rather than being connected to the facts. Facts are neutral. Here's how you can know that that it's a fact and not an assumption. Facts are neutral. They don't have emotional charges. They don't have presumptions embedded into them, and they are grounded in the truths. And the truths are true today, they're true tomorrow, and they're true next year, and they were true before. So those are facts. So learn to be skeptical about your assumptions, and learn to be skeptical when you hear other people's assumptions as well, that you don't take those as facts. Now, when I say other people, I am referring to the people around you, your friends and family. I'm referring to also external authorities. This could be external authorities in your life, the teachers, the preachers, the celebrities, the politicians, right? So be skeptical about assumptions. So that's the first thing that gives you strategic skepticism. The next thing is to learn to be skeptical about initial feelings so that you may become certain about rational decisions. Initial feelings. When you first hear something, when you first observe something, it is very natural to have initial feelings about it. But sometimes those initial feelings go on to drive your behaviors. Sometimes they cause you to put the brakes on. Sometimes they cause you to turn around and run. Sometimes they cause you to withdraw inwards and to stop interacting and stop engaging. So be skeptical about these initial feelings, because how many of you would agree that our feelings don't always tell us the truth? Our feelings are not always factual. And wouldn't you agree, have you ever had the experience where you felt really strongly about something, only to find out later on that what you felt strongly about in the beginning wasn't even true at all, or wasn't what you thought it was? Wasn't completely what you thought it was. Haven't you ever had that experience? You've been alive long enough to have had those experiences. Or if you don't remember having those experiences, you see other people having those experiences. Right? So be skeptical about your initial feelings, because when you have a feeling about something, your feelings go on to dictate the actions you take as a result of it. And it would be a shame and sometimes a detriment if you allowed your feelings to dictate your actions, if you're making important decisions about your career or your life. So when you're strategically skeptical about your initial feelings, you now can become rational and certain about your rational decisions. Initial feelings do not lead to rational decisions. Initial feelings lead to sudden impulsive decisions. Rational decisions don't come from the part of our brain that produces initial feelings. Instead, rational decisions come from the part of the brain that are not involved in those initial feelings. It's in your executive centers of your brain that don't have those initial feelings. That's not what's being driven by the executive centers of your brain. So if you want to become certain about your decisions, if you want to become more decisive, as is important for executives, professional executives, then become skeptical about your initial feelings. I once was very skeptical about investing in myself. I mentioned earlier that I grew up in poverty. There was no way that I was going to have my education provided for. But at an early age, in high school, I thought that the only way I can have the life that I wanted was to go to college and to do really well in school. But, after the first degree, I couldn't stop there. And I wanted, and I really felt that I needed to go all the way through to a PhD. And I did that. And during that time, there were so many skill sets when I started working in corporate. There were so many skill sets that I did not learn from my education. My skill sets pertaining to managing people, skill sets pertaining to communication, to leadership, to understanding myself, to understanding human behaviors, to understanding and knowing more about business acumen. Those things I did not get from my college education. And I knew in that moment that I needed to invest in myself and learn that outside of college institutions. But that involved an investment that I needed to make in myself. And I was so hesitant to do so because it felt like a risk. I already took on a debt to go to college. I already took on a debt to take my master's degree. I already had a debt sitting there that I was going through a PhD, and I had a debt even though I was doing my PhD. And so initially investing in myself felt like such a risk. So my initial fears were my initial feelings for investing in myself. And I listened to those initial feelings at first, and therefore I didn't invest. But I couldn't ignore it over time. I really couldn't ignore that. As a result of not investing in myself, I couldn't communicate the way I needed. I couldn't lead the way that I needed to. So then I made that skepticism. I had that strategic skepticism about my initial feelings, and I invested in myself. I never looked back. So how have your initial feelings been affecting your decisions? Who would you be and how would you decide if you didn't have those initial feelings? My initial feeling was fear about taking that risk in investing in myself. Maybe your initial feelings are different. They could be anxiety. Maybe they may include fear as well. But how have they been holding you back from how you would normally decide if you were not experiencing those initial feelings? The next part about skepticism is this. Learn to be skeptical about convenient shortcuts so that you may become certain about proven paths. The whole world revolves around convenience. You have instant noodles, you have TV dinners, you have quick drive-throughs, you have quick results. The whole world is all about convenience. A lot of people would pay more just to have convenience. A lot of people wouldn't bother to do something if it wasn't convenient to them. It's a revolving around convenience. And as a result of that, the whole world has been operating from a programming that we need to have instant gratification. I need to have it now. If it's not convenient, if it's going to inconvenient me, then never mind, I'm not going to do it. So then be skeptical about that. The convenient shortcuts, the more that you need convenient shortcuts, the more that you will walk past proven paths. And shortcuts are just that. They are shortcuts. Now I understand that sometimes when you're listening to this, you might say, well, shortcuts have served me before because it allowed me to be more productive in shorter period of times. I understand that. What I'm talking about here are those convenient shortcuts. When we see convenient shortcuts, the essence of what we're doing is we're avoiding difficult paths. And sometimes the proven path that works leads us in a journey that is inconvenient, that feels uncomfortable. So the more we desire that convenient shortcut, the more we will try to avoid difficulty or inconvenience or discomfort. But as you know, you've been alive long enough to experience this. The most meaningful goals, the biggest goals, the most important contributions you can make in your life, the path to that is paved with challenge. It's long, it's hard, but it's meaningful. The more meaningful something is, the harder that journey is. So be skeptical about convenient shortcuts. The proven path is the path that is least traveled by, but it is the path that leads you to your most meaningful goals. What's convenient and what's hard are opposites. So if you are ready for a proven path, if you are setting important goals and they really are important to you and they're the top priorities for you and you desire to be led down a proven path, then I invite you to work with me and my teams. There's a link below this video. Submit that link, talk to one of my career advisors. If it's the right fit, then you and I are going to work together, and along with my coaching team. And we're going to show you the proven path to become an expert leader, an influential leader, an industry architect. And I look forward to working with you on the inside. The next step is to learn to be skeptical about comfortable beliefs so that you may become certain about verified truths. Discomfort is necessarily experienced when you're called to change your beliefs. And changing beliefs is necessary if you want to have a different outcome. It was Albert Einstein that said, if you desire to have a different outcome, you can't bring the same psychology to the problem that you're trying to solve. The same psychology includes the same beliefs. So whatever beliefs got you here, those beliefs aren't going to get you there. But sometimes you're not even aware of what you believe because you're busy operating on autopilot. The programmings of the past, the lens of the past, projecting into the lens of the future. You're not even aware of what the beliefs are because it's just been what they have been. And it's comfortable, it's familiar, it is unconscious to you. So raise the consciousness of what your beliefs are. Understand where you've been comfortable. Understand and explore where you've been unconscious about these things. And be skeptical. Learn to be skeptical about these comfortable beliefs so that you can be certain about the verified truths. Because if you are desiring to be a truth seeker, the truth will set you free. But sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Sometimes the truth is painful to hear. Sometimes in order for you to uphold the truth, it requires a complete change in psychology, a completely different change in belief. And the only way to create a different outcome, the only way to become a thought leader is to be a truth seeker. And here's the thing about the truths, is that the truth is its own defense. In other words, if you have been believing in things and you haven't been cross-examining whether or not those beliefs are even true, then as a result of that, it's going to prevent you from being able to seek the truths. And if you were ever to hear the truths, it would be very difficult for you to accept it, very difficult for you to open your mind to it. So the truth is its own defense, which means that it doesn't need you to believe in it in order for it to be true. Just like gravity, you can choose not to believe in gravity, but you better not jump outside of a plane without a parachute. The truth doesn't need your belief. It doesn't need your affirmation or your confirmation in order for it to be true. And the longer you resist the truths, the longer you hold on to your own beliefs and you resist the truths, the longer you stay in the outcomes that you have. And the harder it is to open your mind to what is true or what might be true. The next thing is to learn to be skeptical about your first impulses so that you may become certain about your final choices. One of the key characteristics and traits about an influential leader is to be decisive. But when you're being decisive as a leader, the higher you are in that corporate environment, the less and less information you have to make a decision, but you still got to be decisive. And when you're decisive, it means this is my final decision. I'm not hemming and hawing. I'm not on the fence. It's a final decision. And I've made my decision. First impulses prevent you from making final decisions. Impulses prevent decisiveness. So what are impulses? Impulses are based on initial feelings again, right? Back to the previous thing. Impulses are natural, hormonal, and chemical-driven feelings where we naturally want to avoid things that are unpleasant. We want to avoid things that we perceive to be harmful, or avoid things that are uncomfortable. And we impulsively do that. So this is an impulse. At the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, we have a natural impulse and an instinct to move towards things that are pleasing to us, that produce pleasing emotions, that we perceive to be positive and we perceive to be good. Then we have impulse and instinct to naturally want to attain those things and avoid their opposites, which are the negatives that we perceive. So these are first impulses. have you ever noticed that in life, it's impossible to only have the good things and avoid all the bad things? Have you ever noticed that? So if you are running by first impulses, that means that you are seeking outcomes that are impossible to attain. And seeking what's impossible is the very definition of chronic stress, is making it a goal to attain something that's impossible to attain. And what's impossible to attain is a pleasure without a pain, a positive without a negative, or avoiding negatives altogether. It's impossible because life gives you both. When you make a decision, even if you are decisive, you make a decision, there's consequences to every decision you make. Even your best decisions have consequences. And even your best decisions have positive and negative consequences. Especially in leadership contexts or in business contexts, there's not going to be a perfect decision. And there's definitely not going to be a perfect outcome. So learn to be skeptical about your first impulses so that you save yourself from chronic stress and you become more grounded about reality, more grounded in the reality, which is the truths about life, and you can be decisive. The next thing is to learn to be skeptical about quick wins so that you may become certain about lasting success. I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in success just for today or success just for this week. I'm interested in lasting success. And my whole channel is designed to give you the principles and the strategies and my best content to help you to produce lasting success in your life and in your career. If you're only interested in quick wins, then stop this video, click away from this video and unsubscribe because my content is not for you. I'm not interested in helping you to achieve quick wins. Why? Because I do not condone instant gratification. Quick wins have a grounding, have a mindset in instant gratification. Now, I know there are some leadership courses and some leadership training that teach team leaders that it's important to give your team quick wins, to set them up for quick wins. But if you look at that, why do they say that? The whole purpose of that is because they want to help to increase team morale. They want to increase the team's motivation to stay on the team. Well, I would say instead of giving them quick wins, why don't you look at the root causes at why they might have demoralization, why the team might be demoralized, why might they be not motivated why look at the root causes of those things instead of embedding processes in there to give your team a quick win. Because if you're taking that route and constantly embedding quick wins into the processes just to keep them motivated, the moment the path becomes hard, the moment challenges come, your team members aren't going to be prepared for it because they're going to want the quick wins. But when and where does life turn out that way? Especially if you're working in a business. There's no such a thing as a perfect business. There's no such a thing as a perfect team structure. And any project you can work on, any company objective that you're working towards, some of those things, the path to achieving those things is paved with challenges that you can't have quick wins for. So if you're training your team members to want quick wins and to be motivated only when there are quick wins, then what are they going to do when the going gets tough? What are they going to do when necessarily in a business, sometimes things can come downwards. Sometimes there can be decreases. Sometimes there could be crises. Will they be prepared for that? What's going to happen to their motivations? What's going to happen to the team morale at that time? So be skeptical about quick wins so that you can be certain about lasting success. Are you teaching your teams the importance of having lasting success? And do they understand what it takes, how to become the person who can achieve lasting success? That is more important, more sustainable of a motivator than quick wins. The whole world is focused now on instant gratification. Instant gratification leads to a lot of scarcity. It leads to a lot of people trying something out, having one foot in and one foot out. As soon as something doesn't seem to be working, they give up, or they turn the other way, or they go find another solution. That's instant gratification. And all of this talk, all of this news about quiet quitting, right? About quiet firing, right? A lot of that has its roots in instant gratification. A lot of it. Because what is important in a business context, in a leadership context, is developing patience, which is consistent, persistent endurance. There's no space for that, for instant gratification. There's no space in there for instant gratification. Patience is persistent, consistent endurance. There is no place for quick wins in there. But patience and endurance, that consistent, persistent endurance, that is the recipe for lasting success. And what do businesses want? They want lasting success. Businesses don't just want to be competitive this year. They want to sustain their success. They want to continually grow. It's not about instant gratification. It's not about quick wins for now. It's how can we create lasting success, and how can we have the right team members in our company that are on board with that have that persistent, consistent endurance. So reflect on your own behaviors. How do you respond when your work doesn't seem to be working for you? How do you respond when you're in a crisis? How do you respond when it seems like so much of your effort isn't producing the outcomes you desire? How do you respond? Do you give up? Do you start having second thoughts about staying on the team? Do you start looking for other options? Do you start wishing for quick wins? So be skeptical about those things and be more certain about lasting success. The next thing is to learn to be skeptical about popular opinions so that you may become certain about your own convictions. Popular opinions are just that. They are opinions that a lot of people have. And sometimes we just listen to other people's opinions without even questioning them, without even looking at the origins of those opinions. Who's even having those opinions? What I say is, if you are listening to someone else's opinion, maybe you listened to someone else's opinion on a certain financial investment and you listened to their opinion. What I would say to you is, well, do they have the financial outcome you want? If they don't, then why are you listening to their opinion? So much popular opinion is what goes viral on the internet, is what goes viral on YouTube. It goes viral on TikTok. It goes viral on media and Instagram. But it's just popular opinion. They don't consider your circumstances. They don't consider your personal values. They don't consider who you are. They don't consider your deep-rooted goals. They don't consider those things because it's just other people's opinions. Be skeptical about those things. Another really good example is the New York Times bestseller. You go to the bookstore. As soon as you walk into the bookstore, have you noticed that the first shelf that you see in most bookstores is a shelf of the bestsellers? Most people walk into bookstores and they see that shelf there. What's that shelf? It's just popular opinions. Just because a book is popular doesn't mean it's going to give you the principles to succeed. I don't choose resources based on what's popular. I choose them based on who's grounded in the truths, based on who is speaking from principles, based on what outcome have they produced in their lives and what outcomes have they produced for other people. Have they been able to help other people to have the success that I desire? Then if that's the case, I'm going to listen to their opinions. Bestsellers are a very common example of that. It prevents you from learning from original thinkers. You see, a book becomes a bestseller not because it's good, but because, number one, they've had a lot of resources to put marketing dollars into it. That's really the main reason why books become bestsellers. And why are popular opinions popular? Because they've taken the extra effort and maybe they've had some extra resources to make it become popular. There's a difference between popular opinions and grounded truths that a lot of people have discovered. There's a difference between that. and I'm more interested in convictions. If you're too busy chasing other people's opinions or listening to popular opinions, you're going to step over your own convictions. Have you ever had that experience where you set a goal for yourself and you had all these planned out, the steps you were going to take, and you were telling your friends about it, and then your friends told you should go do something else, and they tell you should do this instead? Have you ever noticed that? Friends and family and people around you, opinions are very easy to give because they're just opinions. They're very easy to give. And when people give opinions, they don't have a stake in it. They don't have a stake in your outcome. They're just giving opinions. They don't have the burden of performance. They don't have the burden of, if they aren't able to help you, then, well, that was just you. They just gave you an opinion. But have you ever noticed that people take opinions as facts? Especially the popular ones. Hey, if everybody's saying it, it must be true. Is it really? Is popularity the only criteria for truth? The only criteria for credibility? What made popularity equal credibility anyways? Wasn't it just someone else's opinion? Learn to be skeptical about popular opinions. It's the same thing as you go and you want to buy a product online and you see a negative review. And that negative review is the only thing you look at and you decide not to invest in it. Well, you don't know what came from behind that negative review. It could have been someone who's just negative about everything. Just because someone else's opinion that this item is not good, is not positive, doesn't mean that that's true for you. Be careful about the opinions you're injecting in your life. Be careful about the opinions and how you're letting them shape your own decisions. All right, let's move to the last one. Learn to be skeptical about surface appearances so you may become certain about deeper realities. Surface appearances are not just how things look. Well, it is, right? Because it is appearances. But I'm talking about something a little bit deeper than that. Pun intended. Surface appearances is just what is superficial. Be skeptical about the things that are superficial. So an example of something that is superficial, our tactical advice is very superficial. Tactical advice, which means advice that just comes from a million different things you can do, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's just so surface level. And if you take that tactical advice, you might get a win today, but it's not repetitive. It's not duplicatable. So be skeptical about surface appearances. Surface appearances also mean what is on the outside, which means in the sphere of your observations, as you observe what's happening around the world around you, those are made up of surface appearances. If you don't believe me, look it up. Quantum mechanics, quantum physics. What you see in the world around you is not actually what's there. All the shapes you see as you're walking down the street, you see the shapes of the cars, you see the buildings, you see buildings as separate from the cars that drive past, you see the people that walk past you, and you see each person as a separate individual, right? As they walk past the lamppost, you see the lamppost as a separate object compared to the sidewalk. But if you are looking in terms of actual realities, the reality of the world is made up of vast amounts of space. Vast amounts of space. A lot of space between molecules. So what does that mean? What does that law of nature tell you? To question what you think you see. To question what you think you see through your own perspectives. Because so often what you think you see is seen through the lens of our own assumptions. What I mentioned earlier, be skeptical about your own assumptions. We make assumptions because our brain is constantly looking for shortcuts, which is also what I mentioned to be skeptical about, those shortcuts. Your brain is constantly taking shortcuts so that you make assumptions and you can make these quick decisions and to have instant gratification. And you protect yourself. But be skeptical about what you see around you. Question the validity of what you are assuming, so that you may be certain about deeper realities. I'm not interested in surface appearances. I'm not interested in your opinions, what you think you see around you. I'm interested in opening your eyes, opening your mind, and opening your life to the deeper realities. And when you are open to the deeper realities, that's when you can produce lasting success. That's when you are grounded in your own convictions. That's when you can see the things around you in a way that serves you and the people that you desire to serve. So once again, if you're listening to this and you desire for that truth in your life, and you desire to be able to produce outcomes not from who you are today, but from who you might become if you had that strategic skepticism, then I invite you to work with me in my coaching program, Mastery Accelerator, that is designed to help you to see these things and to help you operate from the highest level of an influential leader. And if you're serious about that next step in your career path, then click the link below this video and talk to one of my career advisors. And if it's the right fit, you're going to come into the Mastery Accelerator. I'm going to be working with you. I'm going to be teaching masterclasses and also having workshops as well. And I look forward to your journey. So in summary, in this training, in this session, I talked about 8 areas in which it would be wise to have strategic skepticism. The first area is in your own assumptions. The second area is in your initial feelings. The third area to be skeptical about is in convenient shortcuts. The fourth one is in your comfortable beliefs. The fifth one is skeptical about your first impulses. And the next one is in popular opinions. And the last one is in surface appearances. If you will learn to be skeptical in these 8 areas, you can be certain about yourself and the realities around you. So with that, I'm grateful to have you here. I'm going to have to let you go for now. Have a blessed rest of your week, and I'll see you again next week. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.